Welcome to the mental space. Now, recently, Dubai launched its mental wealth framework, a 105 million dirham project over 5 years to promote mental health. One of the concepts behind it, though, being mental wealth, is that the conversation around mental health is not just about mental illness or us struggling, but also how we can be our best and how that mental health can actually increase our performance. Well, our guests today are two people that know all about this. Please welcome to the podcast, Mr. Jason Leavy, no stranger to many people here in Dubai, the founder of Prime Performance Labs, and cognitive neuroscientist, Samira Cutts. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Scott.
Thank you for having us.
So, Prime Performance Labs, you've just founded it, you've just launched it. Tell me what it is.
So the premise of Prime Performance Labs is to live better and lead better, because I think leadership has never been tougher. So you've got a constant pace of change, that always on mindset. And frequently, as you know only too well, it can be a very lonely, demanding role.
Yeah.
The reality is that when it comes to leadership support and development, most programs are unfortunately stuck in the 1990s. They don't leverage what we now understand about the human mind and body through neuroscience, and of course the ability to measure it through tech and data.
Seems like Jason just neatly tagged you in there when we're talking about the neuroscience. It's a bit early to get into the science, but hey, let's go with that from the top. Tell us about the neuroscience then. What is it we know today that perhaps we didn't know 5 or even 10 years ago?
I think the science has actually always been there. But as Jason and I have spoken in such depth about this between each other, the difference is that it's always stayed in a lab setting or a clinical setting, and it's never really made its way fully immersed into a corporate field, which never really fitted in very well for us as individuals and for individuals who are working within a leadership capacity. And what's really nice about the Prime Performance Labs is that it is very much an amalgamation of neuroscience and the way that we understand how our brains work and how important our cognitive function is in actually creating leadership success. And so the very core value of Prime Performance Labs is immersing all of that data and science and knowledge and expertise and embedding that within our coaching practice.
So I'm going to ask you to do something which I think is going to be incredibly easy for you to do, especially Jason. I want you to imagine that I'm an idiot. That didn't take long, did it? Explain to me what Prime Performance Labs actually does in the day-to-day. So I'm the obstinate client behind the desk who wants you to sell it to me, but I'm none too bright. In simple layman's terms, what is it you do?
Well, me specifically, I'm on the cognitive neuroscience side of things. So we are looking at how somebody's brain function can impact on their ability to make decisions, and to react to particular situations and impacts on their behavior. And so when we look at this as a whole, how does that then create a specific type of leader, and how can we help to enhance their performance to be a better leader? So we take a lot of the science and knowledge about how our brains work and how we can enhance things to move away from a fixed type of a mindset to more of a flexible growth mindset, and how we can use that on a practical day-to-day basis to enable a leader to make better decisions and to have better communication with their colleagues and their team, to be able to impart knowledge and expertise to their team in a way that fits in well with them, and to be generally more successful in their role.
Jason, I'll tag you in here as well, because when we're talking about leadership, I've worked for some stinkers. I'm sure you have in your time as well. Is it actually possible to encourage and develop that growth mindset? Because in a lot of industries, particularly the industries perhaps we've worked in, people were promoted because they were good at a process. They were good creatively, but not great with people. Yep. Now, and sometimes we're given some defense because they were never trained to be. That was never a requirement for them. But obviously, increasingly in this day and age, emotional intelligence, the ability to inspire people, the ability to bring people with you is more and more important to leadership. And I know we have a class of kind of boomer leadership that are terrified of that because that means they have to talk about their feelings. But how do you encourage? I mean, is it possible?
Without question.
Yeah.
Without question. And science tells us that's the case. So Samira referenced, for example, a growth mindset. So neuroscience will tell us that it's perfectly possible to rewire your brain. So in terms of adapting to different behaviors, you and I know that great leadership is essentially that wonderful blend of art and science. I think the missing piece for me to date has been the science. So Samira mentioned about we've already known so much of this in a lab setting. I felt that when I went on my own journey, so I'd qualified as an executive coach with INSEAD back in 2018.
Yeah.
But I felt there was still a missing piece in terms of that leadership puzzle. And so looking at cognitive health and performance, understanding its direct relevance to key leadership skills, how you manage stress, how you regulate your emotions, how you're able to solve complex decisions under pressure, how you're able to creatively problem solve. All of this is fundamentally dictated by your cognitive health and performance. And we're in an era where that can be measured and enhanced. So I think in many respects, Prime Performance Labs is about that blend of art and science. It's about tearing down the silos that exist, taking that scientific rigor and academic knowledge and translating it into practical leadership skills and techniques.
Now, me and you have both been leaders.
Yes.
And I remember when I got into leadership, boy, I stank. I was not good at it. I would been brought up in the, I was kind of the abused becomes the abuser until I learned on the road, on the journey. Give me a little insight into your journey, as a leader. Were you always great? Or what were the lessons you learnt on the way?
I don't think I was ever great. I think genuinely, I think it's very similar to you. We came through similar backgrounds, regional UK newspapers.
Yeah.
I think that was a very...
Not many people emotionally regulate there.
You can say that again. Very misogynistic environment.
Very true.
A lot of machismo. And so I learned through trial and error. I learned because I wanted to learn. I had self-awareness about my inadequacies. And fundamentally, I'd always believed, and I think some of this was also from my training on the physical side of things. Martial arts had a big formative impression on me in my teenage years. So that quest for knowledge, quest for growth was embedded in very formative years. And I applied that same curiosity and desire for growth to leadership. So read a lot. Studying as an executive coach in the first instance was because I wanted to be a better leader. I was very happy in my role at Vice at the time. So it wasn't with a view to role transition. It was actually being able to learn and take practical insights that I can implement, and take practical insights that I could implement in the workplace to be a better leader for the team. But I think the quest never stops. And I think what we want to do is recognize that you shouldn't have to do it alone in isolation. There's an opportunity to accelerate your development. There's an opportunity to learn about areas like stress management. There's an ability to learn about how you can rewire to adapt a growth mindset. So I think this is not something that constitutes woo-woo behavior. It's grounded in evidence, driven by data. And I think the other really important thing, Scott, and you'll understand this, is having a hyper-personalized approach. So I think that still leadership development is dominated by one-size-fits-all mentality. Do program X and you'll be a great leader. I think that's absolutely archaic. I think everybody has to be authentic in role to be effective. And so I think our whole program is about meeting that individual where they are, understanding them in terms of their data, but also their lifestyle, because only then, I think, can you truly understand and help them in an integrated fashion.
It's a little early for a mic drop moment, but that was pretty good.
Very impressive.
So back to you then, Samira. Again, tell us a little bit more tell me a bit more about your background. So what does a cognitive neuroscientist actually do?
So essentially, we look at one's brain function and we identify very specific parts of the brain and how they behave to understand how our brain functions as a whole. even within cognitive neuroscience, there can be specialist areas. So for me specifically, I'm very interested in how the brain works on a network level. So essentially what that means is, how is the brain connected? How does connectivity work in our brain? And how does that influence the way that our brain works? And so the context for me is my background. So I am very clinically embedded. I'm also a clinician. And I have been practicing clinically for 23 years now. And I come from a strong neuromusculoskeletal rehab background. And so this all started because I wanted to find better interventions to treat people that were experiencing chronic pain.
Okay.
And here I am today, still trying to find that solution. But I've learned a lot of great things along the way.
And I think the crucial thing here is, and we've spoken about this a lot, and also with Dr. Brendan, our Chief Scientific Advisor, to which we owe you a debt of gratitude because you connected us.
Well, A, you're very welcome, and B, he's incredibly... he's done some amazing stuff as well. And from Brendan, Dr. Brendan Stubbs, by the way, who is a judge for the Mentl Awards. The entries are open for 2025, so get your entries in. He also works with Mentl on our wellbeing consultancy side of the things. He did a great project with ASICS around physical exercise and how that can improve cognitive behavior, cognitive performance. And that's very much data led. So you can see why that's attractive to leaders in terms of, okay, well, I kind of get that if I'm fitter and stronger and that my brain is working better, then that might make me perform better in any arena, whether it be sporting or business. Tell me to your specialism, Samira. What is it you do? Similar, overlap, or
Very
you?
similar, but also quite different and a strong overlap.
Same, but different.
Very much so. So as I mentioned, I'm very much all about the connectivity of the brain, and I look at the electrophysiological side of our brain. And essentially we know that we have synaptic connections, and it's through those synaptic connections that we can then communicate with different parts of our brain.
Okay.
What people don't know so much is about how active different brain regions are. And problems can occur when we obviously have two hemispheres, the left hemisphere of the brain, the right hemisphere of the brain. If there are asymmetries in the connectivity levels, so if one brain region, for example, a part of our executive function that's involved in decision making at the front of our brains, if on one side of the hemisphere it's underactive and on the other side of the hemisphere it's overactive, that can cause a lot of imbalances and create implications on our mood state, our ability to create good decision-making abilities, our memory. It can even impact on processing speed and emotional regulation. So if we have that foundational knowledge and understanding, we can then influence it to have a more of a symmetrical way of working between hemispheres.
So to shortcut in a way, that grumpy boss that I used to work with who made my life a misery, I should have been sympathetic to him because maybe he had an imbalance between his left and his right brain.
No, not so much.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
But I'm really, really fascinated by this. So the work that you do, how do you address those imbalances? If you say those imbalances may cause poor decision making or difficulty in emotionally regulating, how through the work can you redress that balance?
Absolutely. So like Jason said, my main forte is neuroplasticity. So neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to adapt and reorganize. So essentially what we are doing is we are laying in new patterns of learning, which are then going to overwrite the old ways that no longer work for us. So we have some really sophisticated technology that we use to do this. So I specialize in the use of neuromodulation technologies. So things like non-invasive brain stimulation, quantitative EEG, electroencephalogram, and also neurofeedback training. And so with a suite of neuromodulation technologies, we can influence different parts of the brain and also brainwave state patterns to create long-term changes so that we are essentially using technology to lay down the cabling and overwrite the cabling that does not work for us.
And is age a factor in that? Because I know that we're often told just neuroplasticity, and the more that we actually embrace that, the better it is for our long-term brain health, I guess.
Absolutely.
So is there, if I am that boomer boss who is looking at the world today and going, I just don't get the kids. I don't get this requirement for emotional intelligence. It was never required of me. I'm actually quite scared of the world of work today. And I've got two choices. I can and there are many that double down on the anger, double down on the power trip, double down on the, machismo, as you say. But then there is that other way. It's not too late for them.
Absolutely not. In fact, it's quite the opposite.
Okay.
So people, and again, this is a bit of a myth, people make the assumption that because we age, we should be going into cognitive decline. This is incorrect. And a lot of the recent research in the last 5 to 10 years actually supports that notion. So you may or may not have heard about all of the research at the moment associating leg strength with cognitive function. So we know, okay, I'm going to blow your mind.
I've been to the gym this morning, so I'm hopeful here.
It's wonderful. But there is also a very
It wasn't leg day,
protocol. So we know that if we maintain muscle mass specifically within our leg muscles, that will actually preserve our cognitive function for later on in life, which means that can also potentially play a role in trying to prevent and minimize dementia, which has huge long-term clinical implications. But more importantly, what we have now learnt is that age does not determine our cognition. If we stop moving as much, that is a determinant. That's a factor of why we are not doing particularly well. So that's a really controllable factor. That gives back our locus of control. So if you are active in the gym, and this is where the overlap lays with Dr. Brendan Stubbs' research, is that if we use movement as a form of medicine, which it very much is, and dose it correctly, so again, the research shows us that it's not just sufficient to just go to the gym, you have to do very specific things. So you have to strength train. And even within strength training, it's not just sufficient to just lift anything. You actually have to lift around 70 to 80% of your body weight 3 times a week. So that's quite heavy in order to see an impact, a significant impact on your cognitive function.
Heavier for some of us than others.
I think, to Samira's point, Scott, I think the critical thing here is we have a very strong, deeply seated belief in an integrated approach. So if you look at leaders, what are their 2 most precious commodities? It's time and energy. And if we look at the current approach, it's very siloed. So you're expected to go over here to speak to an exec coach or a therapist, over here to a PT or CrossFit or a gym class. For your cognitive health, arguably your most important quality as a leadership, or arguably your most important quality as a leader, your superpower, there's nothing. Gimmicky brain training apps, the old Huberman podcast. So if we were talking about it in binary supply chain terms, it's broken and fractured, and these different suppliers don't talk to each other. So we felt very strongly that given sleep, nutrition and exercise are huge influences on your cognitive health and performance, as well as your overall well-being, it's absolutely critical to have that coordinated, integrated approach and take all the friction out of the current setup.
We've seen that in the conversation around mental health, whether it be healthcare providers, the public, the public sector, the government, talking about the fact that we're kind of trapped in verticals when we should be looking at horizontals, where it should be everybody, it should be every element of it in partnership with the next element, rather than just focusing on one and focusing on another. Can I return though? Because I'm just absolutely fascinated.
Please do.
Legs. Legs are going to make my brain better.
Yes.
What am I supposed to be doing with my legs?
You need to increase the muscle mass within your legs. So you're really working on that quad strength and the glutes and the hamstrings. And that is actually going to create an association, because essentially as humans, we are designed to move and to keep moving.
Yeah.
And so if we keep doing this, we will be healthy. What happens as we age is we move less. And that creates a condition known as sarcopenia, which is actually, it reduces your muscle strength, your muscle mass.
Okay.
And it's that actually leads to a cognitive decline, because then that means that you're going to move less. So you see this cycle, this pattern of behavior, which all comes back to actually, on an ancestral side of things, what we are designed to do on this earth. What are our special abilities? Why are we still here? And if we move away from that, we will then go into ill health, which will create a cognitive decline. And people then think that, oh, it's just because I'm aging, but actually it's not. So people should still be as fit as they were in their 20s. If they're in their 40s or 50s, you should only really start seeing a cognitive decline because of age-related reasons until the age of 70.
So I've got a bit of time to work on my legs then.
So when somebody tells me, oh, they're too old, I'm not falling for it.
Modern day workplaces then, because that seems counterintuitive to the science, because we have people immobile for very long spans of time. You know, one of the things I did in my last kind of leadership role was ban desk lunches and just tell people, get up, go for a walk,
Well done,
leave your desk and move. And also like mid-afternoon, I read some book, I think it was by Daniel Pink, which talked about some of that science when people were crashing, like go for a 10-minute walk and then come back to their desk. But we have a problem with the modern day workplace, don't we?
We do. And I think it's that always on mindset and the false correlation between working long hours for still this, wearing it as a badge of honor. You and I both know this. And again, science tells us it's completely ineffective, that your cognitive performance will drastically decline at a certain point. I mean, let's look at the state of Elon rocking up in the White House recently. As a prime example, there's a man who's a genius who is displaying every sign of burnout right now.
So many things I could say, but I won't.
So many things.
So many things. But to talk about the science around that one then as well, whether it be burnout or...
Yeah, and so I will defer to Samira in terms of the details around the science, but I think there's one really important thing to communicate, which is because of this siloed approach, I think there's almost a toxic gladiatorial cycle at the moment. Stay in the arena, grind hard until you're on your knees. But only then does the well-being element kick in. Hey, we'll take you out of the arena, we'll patch you up temporarily, and then we'll throw you back in again.
Yeah.
For sustainable high performance, you need to have a different approach, a foundation of well-being on which you build. If you're not a healthy human, you can't perform. So obvious, right?
Well, look, we've seen it from our kind of lived experiences, and the statistics tell me like around, because you know we talk about hustle culture, that's also very associated with entrepreneurs.
Absolutely.
And we're both, I always feel a bit weird saying I'm an entrepreneur, but we started businesses, and the statistics are, 9 out of 10 will fail. Yet we've got that married to hustle culture. You must work every hour you have. And yet 90% of new businesses fail. And it just feels not from a scientific perspective, but that there is a better way. But what is the science around hustle? You know, at what point does the performance actually start petering off? Because we see people, you know, is it a 48-hour week? Is it a 60-hour week? You know, you've got bosses pushing their people to 70-hour week because they think they're going to get more productivity. But is that a fallacy?
Completely. And I think, again, I'm very much about understanding that as humans, we have so much heterogeneity, so we are so uniquely different. Even, you know, the three of us sitting here, we will have very different brains, and they're wired in very different ways. And actually, the more understanding we have about how we specifically work and how our brain works for us, and understanding that and actually supporting that, then that's what's going to create effective workplaces and more productivity. So just to give you an example and just go into that in a little bit more detail. So, you know, and that's very much based around the notion of stress and chronic stress. So going back to the hustle culture. Because we know that experiencing stress acutely is good for us and can be motivating and helpful to spur action and create productivity. But it's only a mechanism that's designed for short-term purposes, you know, that fight-flight response to create a response. And thereafter, we should be replenishing our stores and spending time where we are relaxing. So that's when we are actually then activating what we call our parasympathetic nervous system, which is designed to relax and replenish our stress hormones. If we don't do that, we won't have adequate levels, and things don't work well if they're not replenished. And when we experience chronic stress, it doesn't give the body an opportunity to spend any time in that parasympathetic nervous system where we can replenish stores, which means you just continue to release stress hormones repetitively. And of course, we work in it as an integrated system. So once we start to continuously burn all of our hormones, our immune system gets a bit worried. And it's like, guys, something's happening here. Something's not right. There's something really wrong. Maybe a big disease or illness is coming. So we need to get ready and prepared. So then the immune system will then activate all of the inflammatory markers in the body. So that's a systemic inflammatory response. Again, acutely, inflammation is good for us. It's there as a protective mechanism to support us and protect us from any kind of disease or foreign body. But because this has all been instigated from a psychological threat from work, which is chronically occurring repetitively, continuously, there is no real physical disease coming. And so the inflammatory markers cannot relax. They can't come back down because they're continuously being told there is a threat coming, there's a threat coming.
Yeah.
And so then you move from a state of acute inflammation to a state of chronic inflammation. Now the body's really confused because it's chronically inflamed, the entire body. So you'll start to see signs like multiple joint pains.
Yeah.
People will complain of shoulder pain, elbow pain, ankle pain, knee pain. They may get rashes. Their gut will be very unhappy. They will experience mood changes. And so what you will start to see, I start to see certainly in my clinic, is signs of people going down an autoimmune trajectory because now the body's attacking itself because it doesn't know what else to do. It's confused. And if people don't listen to those signs and symptoms, because essentially that's your brain's way of whispering to you through your body, through physical symptoms, you need to stop, you need to calm down. And if you don't do that, then actually a real disease will occur, such as cancer, celiac disease, or Hashimoto's. And essentially the root of all of this is stress and inflammation. So they are preventable, they are reversible.
So toxic workplaces are genuinely physically toxic for us.
Very much so.
Absolutely.
That's kind of scary and puts a lot of things in perspective. I mean, we've seen some of the science, some of the data recently coming through, but what confuses me is that why leaders are not seeing this. And I know that they're not going to, some of them at least, are not going to care with their heart, but they should be caring with their sort of business brains on. The Gallup survey recently, the Global State of the Workplace survey, the cost to businesses from disengaged employees, people sat at their desk, feeling stressed, not engaged with the work that they're doing. Here in the UAE alone, and we got exclusive figures from Gallup, was $42 billion per year, $24 million per hour going up in smoke. Why are leaders not getting this, Jason?
So I think there are a number of factors, in all honesty, and I think one is that lack of knowledge, because of that lack of understanding of the integrated approach. And I think one important thing to build on what Samira was saying, I think there's a well-being industry that far too frequently is disconnected from the realities of leadership. So there's no point saying to a highly pressurized CEO, hey, you need to do 2 hours of breath work a night. It's not realistic in this world. You need to meet them where they are. You need to understand that environment, which is why the lived experience piece becomes important.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so the key is not saying you shouldn't experience stress. Certain amounts of stress are actually incredibly beneficial. They help you focus, you're energized. The key is knowing how to oscillate. So if we're talking about a scale of 1 to 10, there are times where many leaders need to be a 10. The key is understanding you can't maintain a 10
all the time.
Look at elite sports, way ahead of business in terms of understanding what constitutes high performance and understanding the role that wellbeing has to play as part of that. So the key is how you move from a 10 to a 2 as quickly and efficiently as possible. And in those finite windows of rest and recovery, what you do to maximize that. So let me tell you what you don't do. You don't go doom scrolling on social media but many people, I used to think it's got, I'll be that guy who's like, deadline done, I'm going to go on the gram and chill. The reality is
You're cooler than me, the gram.
Either that or I'm just showing that actually I'm a real old ancient.
He's not wearing socks, I am,
I've got very small ones. They're height proportionate. The Josh Waitskin, who I think is a phenomenal thought leader in this space, wrote The Art of Learning, former child chess prodigy who subsequently became an adult martial arts champion, and talks a lot about the body-mind connection. He talks about the dangers of the simmering six. And many leaders live in that world where they'll do a 10, they can't maintain the 10, and they drop to this 6 where they're sort of putting in the hours, but they're limping along, they're keeping their head above water. They know they're not performing at their optimal level. What they need is that ability to be at a 10 and then to switch down to a 2. So what switches you to a 2? Neuroscience teaches us there are evidence-based techniques. Walking in nature, reading a physical book, breath work. So the solutions are out there. And I think our role is to share those solutions, work with those leaders, because I think many of them, if they understand that they're evidence-based and that actually they're not going to require a huge investment of time, this is about adapting them into their existing lifestyle, will be far more receptive. Because again, these are smart individuals who, and to my second point around this, behind whatever public facade they're maintaining, have a strong level of self-awareness. But existing support systems.
I'm thinking of some of those leaders I've worked for, and I'm with you with it. I mean, it's fascinating as well because for the for 3 years since I started Mentl, I've been talking about mental health and tackling the stigma. People should be able to talk about their mental health. It's not just about mental illness. That is very, very important, and it is very, very important as well to talk about the fact that we've got an increasingly neurodiverse workforce and how we retool around them. But it's often, there's this mistake within leaderships that when we talk about mental health, we're talking about admitting to weakness or it's woo-woo, when actually what we're talking about, and it's part of your title, is prime performance. It's how you can actually help everybody be better, which is actually better in the long run for your business.
And I'm so glad you said that, because I think given the power dynamics around leadership, this isn't just about you showing up as your best version of yourself. This is about you showing up at your best for everyone around you. So the network and multiplier effect is massive. Yeah. So I think there are two very clear ROIs for investing in mental health and performance. Firstly, if you're able to make better decisions under pressure, we all know the impact that will pull through on the bottom line. Unquestionable. The second one is cultural. If you are 5-10% better in role, that has a huge impact on everyone around you. You are setting the tone in terms of leadership by example, and also, again, the ability to share the path forward. And we know that path forward is there because of the evidence and because of the data. And I think that's the step change compared to even 5 years ago. I mean, I would have been, back in the day, one of those guys who's like badging myself on resilience. I'm just going to go harder, stronger, longer, something like breath work. I would have been a cynic. What have I done? I've studied the science around breath work and understood the immense benefits. And I think, again, it's about breaking down these artificial silos. Mental and physical health are completely interrelated, for example.
Yeah, I don't understand why it's two different conversations.
I think it's because you've got industries who've built up, who are dependent on
Verticals.
owning that vertical.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the most powerful things about working with Samira and Brendan is that we want to tear those walls down and also democratize the access to this information. So a huge part of the program, for example, is that when you finish the 6 months, you understand the science behind it, the practical techniques you can implement, so the transformation is sustainable. Versus, I think, what you see in some commercially driven entities where they try and create a dependency cycle.
So I'm going to pay homage to one of the podcasts out there, which is spoken to lots of, I know you talked about elite sports, the High Performance podcast.
Yes.
And I've heard some great stories and some great podcasts on that podcast. They always ask a question, which to the athletes, which is, what does high performance mean to you? So I'm going to ask you both, what does prime performance mean to you? Samira, I'm going to start with you on that one.
For me, again, go back to the brain, because I love brains. It's really neural optimization. Are you able to get the most function, the most capacity out of the hardware that you've been given? And I can measure that and immediately see that just by asking a few questions about how one lives their life. So how often are you exercising every day? How much sleep do you get? What are you eating? Where would you place your stress? And just those 4 questions will give me everything I need to know about whether or not somebody is actually leading a healthy life and if they're able to get the most maximum capacity and productivity out of their brain.
I'm not sure I want to answer those questions on the podcast.
We can do it after.
Okay, so let's actually go through that one then.
Okay.
Ask me those questions and then
Okay.
tell me what you think, because I recognise that things aren't great. So those 4 questions.
Let's go with the first one,
Yeah.
movement, because I am a movement specialist, so that's an important one. How often do you exercise a day? A week, sorry.
I'm reasonably okay on that one. I'm going to give myself a tick on that one.
Oh, before you give yourself a tick, though, don't earn it that quickly, I'm afraid.
Oh, right.
So I need to know how often you're going and specifically what you're doing.
Okay, so I do and usually 5 times a week if I can,
Great.
which is the F45 class. And one day is strength, and the next day they do, it's kind of like a mix of cardio, but strength as well. And then it's strength and then cardio strength and then a mixture of all of them with a bit of core. So I'll do that 5 days a week, and then I'll do a 50k bike ride or a 60k bike ride on a weekend.
Okay.
I should swim more. I'm trying to get myself back into that one, but for now, that's where I'm at on the physical exercise front.
So just a note about that,
Yeah.
if you don't mind.
No, I'm here to learn.
I do actually love F45. I love the culture and I love the fact that they are promoting physical activity and it's accessible. One thing I would say is it's not enough strength training.
Okay.
And also because you're on the bike, so you've got great conditioning. And I do feel like F45 is much more heavy on the conditioning side, even on the strength days, because they use a high interval, a HIIT style training.
Yeah.
And actually, I think when you get to a certain age, I don't think the HIIT's particularly good, especially if you are a high performer in a corporate field, because going back to stress hormones, sometimes what high intensity interval training can do is actually trigger a stress response and release cortisol production, which is actually counterintuitive to what we're trying to do.
Interesting.
So actually adopting more of a low intensity style training, which you can do within strength work, can be more beneficial. So you are excellent and far better than the average.
I'll go for good with room for improvement.
But I'm going to give you 3 quarters of a tick there.
Go on. 3. Okay, fair enough. I'll take that. So I should be doing more
strength work.
More strength
Pure
work.
strength work.
Pure strength work. Okay, like that. Okay, question number 2.
Okay, how much are you sleeping?
I am terrible.
Let's break that down further.
Yeah.
So how many hours sleep do you get per night?
Well, last night about 3.
And is that normal?
No, usually about 5 or 6, but I'm not a good sleeper. But I also have, it's something that I need to work on, and there are some other issues around. If I drink more than I should, because if I don't, my brain does not shut off, and it keeps going all night, and I don't sleep. Even when I stay off alcohol for 2 months, I will still.
So alcohol's not the issue, but it is
There is
compounding
something.
the issue.
I was actually talking to a GP today about what are the factors we can do, because I have got good sleep hygiene, even in those spaces when I'm off. Sorry, this is all becoming about me now, but it's fascinating. So sleep, that's poor. I know that's an area for massive improvement.
When do you train, Scott?
In the mornings. Yeah, before the kind of day gets going. So usually around 8:30 to 9:30, and then I can get into my day.
So going back to the sleep side of things, we know, again, from research that we should be sleeping around 8 to 9 hours. Again, a little bit variable depending on each individual because we are very unique.
Yeah.
If we get even just 2 hours less per night, that can reduce our cognitive function between 25 to 35%. So you can imagine how that builds up on a consecutive level.
I have to thank my
days and
9-year-old
days and days.
daughter as well for that.
So I already know that that's going to quite significantly impact on your working memory, your processing speed, your decision-making capacity, and also the whole role of sleep is regenerative. So it's designed to clear toxins from our brain, and it's designed to help to consolidate learning and development from the day before. And so if you're not getting sufficient sleep on a chronic level, What that means is you are going to have a higher volume of neurotoxins in your brain that are not being cleared, and they're going to cause issues, and that can lead to inflammation, which we know. And also what it means is that you're not maximizing your capacity to learn and develop. So the sleep is probably, it's worth a lot more points than some of the others.
I don't think we talk about it enough, actually. It's still, I don't hear officers, I don't hear organizations talking about sleep nearly enough as they should do, really. It seems to be, we might start a conversation around well-being and is it flexible working, all that sort of thing, but the organizations are not talking about sleep right now, I don't think.
Sleep is the foundational element.
Yeah.
So we have a North Star methodology to the program, and the S in this case stands for sleep, because if you haven't got your sleep dialed in, then E for energy and W for well-being become increasingly unachievable. And then in terms of determining your North Star, your purpose, if you haven't got that equilibrium, you're in no place to determine what that actually is. And we've spoken a lot about how you have to get those foundational pillars of sleep, nutrition, exercise in place.
Right.
I think something that the wellbeing industry tends to miss, especially in the current quest for longevity, is hugely important and absolutely should be applauded.
Yeah.
But for what purpose? And I think, again, ultimately as complex creatures, it's absolutely critical that we have a sense of purpose. And I think some of the time that can be missing from these conversations as well.
Yeah. We'll come back to that. So I'm not doing very well now. I got 3 out of 5.
So,
and then I probably failed, got a big fat cross on sleep.
I don't like to use the term fail, but it's something that we can definitely optimize. It's unhelpful.
Okay, question 3.
Question 3. Tell me typically what you tend to eat. What's your nutrition like?
Not terrible. And I have to pay massive thanks to my wife, who is very much now into organic food. In the morning, breakfast will often be organic eggs and avocado and healthy. And again, the dinners will be salmon, perhaps steak, but with vegetables, but nothing too bad. Goes out the window a little bit at the weekend, I have to say. There might be some sushi, there might be some takeout, but I've eaten much worse in my life, and there is very little processed food in my diet these days.
This is sounding like a big tick.
Oh,
Yeah,
well.
So again, yes, that's exactly what we look for, is trying to maximize whole foods as much as possible, and minimize and ideally completely eliminate ultra-processed foods and refined sugar. Yeah. But the thing that you fall down, and I'm going to attach the alcohol aspect to that.
Absolutely,
it's an important one because it is a neurotoxin. So if you look at your sleeping habits, and of course there are clearly some underlying challenges there that need to be explored further. But combining your sleep habits with, if there is a lot of alcohol involved in your life, which is a neurotoxin, then that together, combining, you've got a high volume perhaps of neurotoxins that are not being cleared. So it's compounding issues. So that again tells me a lot about how that may impact on your specific cognitive faculties and your overall brain function.
I'm absolutely not going to let my wife watch this, because she's right about diet and she's right about alcohol. Okay, question 4.
Yeah, so we've spoken so far about movement.
Yeah.
And sleep and nutrition, adding on to alcohol with that. What is the last question? I'm just trying to think. Stress.
Stress.
Yeah. How would you describe your stress levels to be, generally speaking?
Ooh, they've changed as well, and in the last 3 years and they've changed in lots of different ways. There was the stress. So I've gone through quite a lot of therapy in the last couple of years. I had massive imposter syndrome. I was deeply insecure, people pleaser all my life. Some of that stems back to historic child sex abuse, which only really came back out again in the last 2 to 3 years. Some of it just massive insecurity. I came out of a very fear-driven childhood. I was homeless when I was 15, bullied. So that has been behind the wheel of mine. So I've been very, very stressed, and not knowing why I've been very, very stressed for a very long time. Now I'm kind of beginning to understand when it's 8-year-old Scott versus 52-year-old Scott. So my stress has changed, but the stress is, when you're running a business, I am still very conflict avoidant, and when you're actually trying to win new business and you have a tendency to take things, because you put a lot of your heart into something, it's then very difficult to step away from it and not take feedback as personal, so that's something I've really had to work on. Being an entrepreneur is actually a different type of stress than being an employee. Sometimes as an employee, I've been much more stressed than I actually am as an entrepreneur. And there are many, many things I can do as an entrepreneur because I have the time to address them. Whereas before, you were trapped. And I also
you have
was
agency. I think that's a critical part.
And
of
also
this.
back then I needed the validation. And when the boss was going, but you should be ashamed, that was really talking to the quick of, Scott, who had been struggling and not knowing why he was struggling. So I guess my stress right now is relatively healthy. It's usually productive. And while I might, sometimes it's difficult to process it and move through it, I do get through it. And it's ultimately, my stress might be client asking for something at the last minute. And I actually have to remind myself, well, I'm very, very lucky to have a client who's asking for something. So, which is a massive step forward for me in terms of emotional processing from even 5 years ago when I would have been, I might get frustrated and I might vent a little, but I will move through that quite quickly to be solution focused. So,
and I think that's to return to our earlier point, it's a great example of neuroplasticity, where you again have rewired behaviorally. You've been adaptive, so
it's
you're
work in
a
progress.
Case in point.
Yeah, but I'd say 5 or 6 out of 10, whereas it used to be 8 or 9, and always on.
Yeah, and I think that's really wonderful to hear. I also just want to say that I'm so impressed with your level of insight and how much work you've actually done to identify what your limiting factors have been as a result of childhood experiences. Because I think a lot of people try to actively avoid that or numb themselves to not have to face that. And it's so refreshing to actually speak with you because you have so much insight and you're so upfront with it and very objective, which is very unusual. And so what we find actually with a lot of individuals is they're not so upfront and they're not so willing to do the work, and they're very much, they try to cloud that or pretend it doesn't exist or there's a darkness. And so often a lot of our role is actually just very gently trying to guide and facilitate and support an individual to get to a place where they're able to face that, because we all know that in life as humans, lightness comes with darkness, and you have to confront that and address that in order to move forward and grow as an individual.
It's funny because my father had a massive alcohol problem, but he was struggling with depression, and I know I've talking about this before, but I actually thought I was starting this mission 3 years ago for my father's story. And then my second reason was for my daughter and my sons growing up in a very polarized world. So I had 3 whys. One was my father's story. The second was my children's story. And last and not least was, and there's work for me to do. Actually, I found over the last 3 years that I started this basically to save my life, and to process what I'd not processed for, 43 years or whenever it was. It happened ago. But it's helped me realize what has been driving me all my life, whether it's that imposter syndrome and trying to overachieve, trying to work so hard, trying to prove, desperate for that validation. So I do feel for many, many people, because so many of us are living behind masks, and it's not easy to take that mask off. I mean, the last 2 to 3 years, I've had to sit in some unimaginable pain, doing the EMDR and all that sort of thing, and I'm still not out of the woods yet, but it's been hugely helpful and hugely beneficial just to know what the drivers are and know what those triggers are and go, that is actually Scott from 8-year-old Scott that's reacting that way, not you as a semi-intelligent human being who's 52 years old and actually has the skills to do this.
Precisely. And actually, so I'm also a chronic pain management specialist, and what I've learned from my experiences of working with people with chronic pain is actually they're not afraid of the physical pain, they're afraid of the emotional pain and having to face that. And so their body then creates a lot of physical pain as a symptom of the unaddressed, underlying, psychologically based emotional pain. And it's like you say, I think once you actually identify that and you're on a trajectory, it's much less painful, much less fearful than actually that initial step of having to.
I had 30 years of pain. I had 40 years of pain before I actually addressed it. And now my stress levels are a 6 or a 5 or a 6. We run so far away from that.
And for you, and that's wonderful to hear, but as a cognitive neuroscientist, I want to take you down to a 2 or a 3. And we have some really lovely cognitive strategies and technologies that we can use to benefit you, to support you even further. So again, it's going back to that initial introduction where you said it's not just about mental health, it's actually about how can we enhance your performance cognitively so that you as a human being can perform on a much higher level and a much higher platform, even though you're older, and be even more successful than you already are.
I like that term, older. Can we go with experience? Now, I mean, I promised my daughter I'll live to 150, so I feel some lifestyle choices need to change. But but it's entirely possible. I mean, many of us will be tapping out at 100 or 120, given what's ahead of us. And it's almost like, if you're a leader right now, I think there are many leaders there who are in their 50s or 55s. If you're in the UK, you're probably working till 65 or 70 anyway. But it's that whole idea again, purpose. Yeah. And I am actually, whether you call it blessed or the universe or whatever, but the fact I actually have a purpose has reinvigorated me post 50, as opposed to what Scott was like at 45. Working for employers who just wanted. I'm working for myself, I'm working for my family, I'm working for a purpose, rather than working for somebody else who just wants to make more money. Yeah. How important is purpose? When we talked about prime performance, Samira gave us her definition of prime performance linked to the brain. Your definition of prime performance?
My definition of prime performance is very simply showing up as the best version of yourself. Now, the reason I distill it down to that is because, yes, there are those leaders out there at the edge of the spectrum who are narcissistic, who are toxic. I think the overwhelming majority of leaders are fundamentally good people who want to do a great job and want to look after the people around them and want to show up at their best. They want to be on their A game. The challenge is, with this conflicting information, with this blizzard on social media of what they should be doing, frequently it's very, very difficult to navigate that path through. So again, that's where I think being able to act as that coordinating intelligence, that co-pilot in life becomes really critical. Purpose, for me, is fundamentally at the spear tip of what we do. Because if you don't have that, even if you're in equilibrium, you're effectively treading water. And again, all the data is there that shows that if you have that sense of purpose, that affects well-being, it affects energy levels. And again, back to what we know from social contagion, has a massive impact on everyone around you. So again, if we use if we look at the world of sport again, science and data is critical to a team's performance. We know that. No premiership team now would work without performance psychologists, data scientists, etc. The power of that rousing halftime talk by the coach still becomes invaluable. So I think Einstein once said, not everything important can be measured. And I think purpose is a critical example of that. If you haven't got purpose in life, if you haven't got that directional compass, that creates a whole series of problems elsewhere.
You and I have both visited Japan and love it. And I love the book and I love the concept of Ikigai and that, again, a purposeful life.
Absolutely.
And how they link it to longevity and how, people having that sense of purpose, staying busy all their life, having something that's their focus has helped them live longer, happier lives. What's the science around purpose then?
So it's interesting that you say that, because actually clinically my discipline, my background is occupational therapy, and that is essentially the science behind the purpose. So we know within healthcare, for example, when people get injuries and illnesses, it takes the reason why that's so disabling or deteriorative is because it takes them away from what they love to do the most. Yeah. So my role clinically, yes, it is to help to treat people and to overcome and manage chronic illnesses and diseases. But more importantly, it's the adaptive function. How can I teach people how to work around what they have if I can't fix it, so they can go back to doing what they love? Because, for example, I have worked with many, many hundreds of stroke patients, and those individuals that can overcome elements of stroke. For example, they may get paralysis on one side or weakness in one side. They may lose the ability to speak. It impacts on their ability to walk. All of these things, yes, they're important as a standalone. But why are they important? Because they can't go back to the boardroom to be a successful leader, or they can't be a chef, or they can't be a mother. And essentially, it's that philosophical element of, this is what I do, this is my identity, this is what I love. So if I can't walk, I can't conduct that role, I can't engage in that role, and therefore life is no longer worth living. But actually, if we can find an adaptive function or regain that function, then I can go back to doing what I love and I'm happy. And that is continuously evidenced clinically. I have worked with many people with spinal cord injuries, and they've made great recovery. But if they can't go back to doing what they love, they're not interested in the recovery. The recovery is only important if they can do what they love.
Scott, I think that throws up a really important point around purpose, which is people tend to talk about purpose with a capital P, as if it has to be some huge initiative to benefit wider society. I think what we're talking about here is purpose with a small p, which is find meaning in your own life, find meaning as a father or a mother, find meaning in your work, find meaning in the positive impact you can
That's
have as
very
a
much
leader
ikigai again in the Japanese concept. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, we share that. And Kaizen, again, continuous improvement. You know, this, I think one of the things we do with the program, because it's 6 months, and that's because we don't believe in the illusion of quick fixes. Meaningful, sustainable transformation takes time, it takes effort, and it takes intentionality.
Sometimes it seems as well that, you know, we live in this world now where, you know, particularly social media, and I remember some of the work Brendan Stubbs did around body image and, you know, the actual fact the before and after pictures in gyms are actually worse for people. Or indeed the fact that you only have to really start with like almost 10 minutes or 8 minutes and 8 seconds, I think it was.
15 minutes, 9 seconds.
15 minutes, 9 seconds. Sorry, 15 minutes, 9 seconds to make that quantifiable boost to, I can see you've been spending time with him. But
every day's a school day right now.
Every day's a school day. Rather than that, just kind of turn off the gram. Turn off all these people that make it almost look like it's too hard. I'm never going to have those pecs. I'm never going to have that six pack. I'm never going to be that super. And I'm so tired of social media where people are trying to portray themselves as superhumans when we know they're actually as screwed as the rest of us.
Absolutely right. And let's talk about the health and fitness industry, because I think it's the most extreme example. The fitness industry has become, in the era of social media, the entertainment industry. So you have a lot of individuals with vested commercial interests in propagating certain untruths. And you have these extremists, because in body terms, they're extremists, they're the 1%, who try and shame others into acting commercially. Health and fitness should be inclusive. Everybody should understand they can get benefits from it in terms of living better. So I think Dr. Brendan doing some pioneering work there. I think it's also a sentiment we share very strongly as individuals who've been involved in our personal lives in recognizing the value of health and fitness. Like, meet people where they are, create pathways of progression. And again, it's back to authenticity. Do something you enjoy. You know, if going on the treadmill in the gym feels like torture, don't do it. It's not sustainable.
That goes back to why I do the F45, because I like the music and I like the community. The gym bores me.
Yeah.
Though now I know it's going to make me smarter. I will work on the legs.
And this is it. It's like gyms. I think people can forget that places like gyms can be very intimidating environments.
Yeah, they can. Oh, absolutely. You know?
Yeah. And so I think there's a lot of work to be done in terms of inclusivity.
Yeah.
And championing others. You know, it should be a community of individuals. It shouldn't be a place for the pursuit of narcissism.
That's almost a mic drop moment there. I could carry on this conversation for hours and hours and hours because it's absolutely fascinating. But we are going to have to wrap things up. But just to come to a close, give me 3 small ways that people can start embracing their own prime performance in their life, whether they're leaders, whether they're middle managers, whether they're mothers, sons, daughters, wherever they are. And I'm going to ask, from a scientific perspective, 3 small steps that people can start to do to bring prime performance into their lives. And then we'll close with you, Jason.
Yeah.
So, Samira.
So for me, it's going to be very much a brain-body approach.
I'd be disappointed in anything less.
Again, I always talk about the low-hanging fruits with my clients. Number 1, get as close to sleeping 8 to 9 hours as possible every single night without fail. Protect it like you would protect a child. That's how important sleep is.
Okay.
And if you can get that, that's 75% of the work done, because it's so regenerative and so healing. Number 2, move every single day. Even at the end of the day, even if you're not doing what we would ideally like to prescribe, something's better than nothing.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be expensive, doesn't have to cost anything. It could be anywhere. Movement is accessible and it's free. So do something. Something is better than nothing. And third one, trying to think.
So many you could pick from, but
so many.
You figure, you talked to me about stress, but you also talked to me about nutrition.
I was about to say, yes.
Yeah.
So food is medicine. And so understanding the importance of eating natural whole foods can mitigate so many potential issues clinically and create an avoidance towards opening up a whole world of ill health just by eating naturally, which should not be hard. We are humans. That's what we're
It shouldn't
designed to
be.
eat,
It's increasingly
so.
expensive, though, when you look at the price of organic versus. But it generally
again,
feels worth it, though.
Yeah, but I mean,
we see the disease rates in the US,
It's
where they're just
phenomenal.
it's ultra processed all the way through.
Yeah. Even if you don't get to eat organically, because again, there is a cost implication. That's the gold standard.
Yeah.
But just eating real food,
Yeah.
that should not be difficult. So meat, vegetables, fruits, it's that simple.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All the pressure's on you, my friend.
It's indeed.
Bring us home.
Treat your emotions as data points. I think there's this dreadful myth that we should be rational creatures. Rubbish. Look at the greatest inventions in history. Never would have happened if those individuals had been rational. No? I think you may have heard this phrase before. Ford would have created a faster horse. The Wright brothers. Everyone told them it was crazy. So taking it down to a day-to-day level, your emotions, if you tune into them, are telling you really important things. And again, there'll be a gut reaction to this of saying, oh, this is a bit woo-woo. They've studied Olympic level athletes, and the greatest indicator of performance, despite all the amazing technology and data we have now, is how they feel.
Yeah.
So I think there's this real tendency, again, you heard me speak earlier about the importance of having agency over your life.
Yeah.
There can be the tendency to outsource this. That's not my fault. It's the way I'm wired. Rubbish. Neuroplasticity tells us this can be changed. I go to a PT. I blindly do what they tell me to do, even if it feels uncomfortable. That's your emotions informing you. And I think that leans into my final point, which is authenticity. Like, be true to yourself, true to your values. Do not feel pressurized to adopt things that don't feel right for you. It won't feel right. It will feel deeply uncomfortable on an emotional level. Again, it's your body and your mind sending you very strong signals. Don't suppress them. Lean into them. Be curious about what they're telling you and what you can learn from that. So I think, again, that curiosity, that willingness to have a growth mindset. Final point.
Final. He's like Columbo.
I know.
Just one more thing.
Just without the wisdom.
Oh, the raincoat.
Yet. Might have to cover up the lack of socks.
Gen Zs, you'll have to look that one up on YouTube. It was a very long time ago. He was a very good detective, though.
Embrace adversity.
Embrace adversity.
We live in comfort zones. Everything can be very easy. And everything we know from science tells us adversity is crucial to growth. And again, think about our greatest setbacks in life. Think about those moments that make us incredibly uncomfortable. That's where we're stretching and growing. So whether you do that mentally, physically, or emotionally, relentlessly seek out adversity, because that's where personal growth will happen most.
I'm just going to leave that there for a second to soak in. Jason, Samira, thank you very much for being on the Mental Space podcast today.
Absolute pleasure, privilege.
It's been wonderful. Thank you so much for
You're
having
doing
us.
amazing work. Truly.
If you've enjoyed this conversation as much as I have, remember, look, if you're watching on YouTube, the subscribe button is just there. So please hit it so you can enjoy more and more conversations like this. Also, if you're listening on podcast channels, whether it be Apple Podcasts or Spotify, go on rate us. I mean, you don't have to give me a 5, but give us a 3. Samira gave me a 3 today. We'll take any rating and subscribe. It helps us more than you know. So thank you very much for tuning in. And one last time, thanks, guys. Jason, Samira, it's been really insightful.